Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katie Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell. I love listening to recordings of sounds, and I also love listening to historic tape. Audio gives us an intimate peek back at the past, at the people we were, in a different way than anything else can. And one of the very first episodes we ever did about studying abroad on this show incorporated a lot of historical recordings. Many of you might be about to study abroad in the fall, or maybe you studied abroad in the past, or maybe you're like me and you never had a chance. Whatever is the case, I know that you are going to love listening to the romantic audio recordings that Sunny mailed to Mike when she was living abroad in Florence in 1963. As it stands, they've known each other since 1959, and they've been married for over 50 years. I sat down with them back in 2016, and I asked Sunny to tell us why she went overseas.
So, I wanted to marry the person sitting next to me, Mike Strong, whom I met at 16. Inappropriate match.
How so?
Several things. My family had pictured someone with a college education. His mother had been divorced. He's farm background, and it was just different. So they sent me to Florence. They thought it was completely safe. It was the first year of Gonzaga in Florence, and wouldn't it be well chaperoned? We had a couple of priests with us after all. And I'm so glad they were so wrong about the chaperoning.
So what year was this?
1963 to 1964. We arrived in the fall, so it was about 10 months.
I think that's interesting. I didn't know that you went partly because your parents were trying to prevent you from marrying Mike. What did you make of that?
Oh, I knew it all along because I had all these problems behind me, also political ones, because her family was very Democrat and my family was very Republican. There's just this whole list of things were going against me. So I recognized it would be a battle. That's why it took 6 years to get to the altar. What
did you make of her going away for this year?
Well, I was in school myself. I mean, I was doing my internship at Sacred Heart Hospital in Spokane. And so I had a full year of long hours. So actually it worked out pretty well, except for the communication challenges.
Right, because of course, 60s, we have no internet, no nothing until the 2000s, late 1990s. And I also want to mention that part of this exploration that we're doing on today's show are listening back onto the old cassette tapes that Sunny sent home.
Actually, you're going into the future.
That's right, because the 80s.
Cassettes weren't around then. We're talking pennies reel-to-reel tape recorders.
Wonderful. So you sent reel-to-reels home, and we have some of the audio from that. So I'm going to be splicing it in as we go along. So we'll be listening back onto you as a 20-year-old. Is that how old you were?
Yes. 20 when I got there, yes.
All right. So tell us about what you remember about arriving.
When we arrived in Florence, we were introduced to the sisters, the nuns. We were living with them. I don't know if they exactly call it a convent because they had several rooms. We were given rules. The harshest one I think about is just acknowledging what other people did in the town that we were in, but we had never heard of. Things like we slept with our mittens because it was so cold. And we had to have very short showers and infrequent showers. Scrolling to the future for a moment, we went back there years later, 50 years later. We couldn't figure out where the nuns' convent was, but we could find out where the pensione was that we lived subsequently after being kicked out of the nuns' convent. And that place also had the same rules. So apparently we were just spoiled. And that was sort of the awakening. We had no luggage. The luggage took a long time to get to us. So it was frantic, it was wonderful, exciting.
Yeah. You're with these nuns and you get kicked out. I feel like there's a big story in there.
Yes. I don't want to shock your audience, but we would leave the nuns' home after sunset. And ignorantly, we would go for a cappuccino because they were so yummy. We didn't know you weren't supposed to have them in the evening. So we would go out there, and it wouldn't hurt if we would meet people along the way. But we were just finished with our studies, and we were ready to party. So we went out. To the nuns, this meant they were housing prostitutes. So partway through the year, we were told listened that if you hold, arm in arm two women going down the street, you're not a prostitute. But that knowledge came a little bit too late. And we were basically asked to leave because of the scandal and also because the priests in charge suspected that we were paying too much. He knew we were paying more than the Italians who were living there. So there was kind of a contention there about the price they were charging these Americans.
What did you think as a 20-year-old when they kicked you out? Did you feel like, oh, thank goodness, or like we're free, or did you feel wronged? Like, do you remember what that experience was like?
Well, I didn't know what was going to be the next environment. I was pretty much a goody two-shoes. So the idea that we had broken rules affected me at age 20. So I think I was a little bit embarrassed that we were kicked out, and they kind of glossed over it, talking about the price issue.
What do you remember her saying about that? Do you remember anything, Mike?
Well, I certainly remember the issue of going out on the street after 5 o'clock. I thought that was really hilarious. Looking back on it now, I can understand what the issues were. But I got these tapes, and she described all this stuff as she was going.
We arrived in Florence, the train station, and the buses drove us just for about 10 blocks. And one great big huge door with 2 gold rings on it is answered by this little tiny nun. These nuns, I cannot believe that they were so tiny. They all hugged us, came up to our waists. We all said buongiorno, that's all we knew, and they said hello, that's all I knew in English. Didn't know what to think of the place at first. I mean, it's very simple compared to America, but yet it's certainly sufficient. The first week was a little rough. We didn't have any hot water, so we washed our hair and took baths in cold water. Another small problem is that the nuns are so careful about the electricity that if you are across the room and there's from a light that's on, they go and turn it off while you're right in the room and everything. So we have to protest, but...
You were digging out these old letters that you wrote home. You found them amusing. Do you want to give us a line of some of the things that you wrote?
Well, sure. These are just little excerpts. This is September, which is the month that we arrived.
By the way, let the record show that I saved her letters.
Did you receive as many letters back from Mike?
Absolutely not. I thought you had forgotten about me.
So she had nothing to save, Mike, or?
Oh, yeah, but I also want to point out that in going over these old letters, she mentions on several of them that she had received a letter from me. So I'm not entirely guilty.
No, there were some letters. Okay, just not as many as my girlfriends received, right? Okay, this is just an excerpt. Yesterday we talked with 4 French students. One stared me in the face and asked why American girls don't care about their appearance. He said the French girls would rather look beautiful than be comfortable, and that they went to the hairdresser once a week. He said we are too shy. We're too reluctant to go to bed with European men. The French hate the way Americans keep throwing high-sounding ideals around. He said we could say no to such an invitation, but why do we also add, I'm Catholic, or I don't believe in it? After all this, he said the Italian men were worse, because they didn't care what girls look like, just so they will have the experience with them. Help! Exclamation point. That was one of my early letters.
Do you have any idea what you thought about that? You're thinking,
Well, yeah.
everybody wants to sleep with your future wife.
Yes, well, I mean, there was this sort of a reputation that Italians had about their interest in women, which we never really fully understood because, of course, we were young and naive. But this is a theme that occurred over and over again, both on her tapes and in her letters, about the advances in the way that the Italian men treated, touched, etc., the girls there.
Do you remember how that made you feel?
Well, what could I do? I mean, we're several thousand miles away, and I'm just hanging on.
Do you think that you wrote all that because it was striking you as very unusual, or were you conveying something else?
All right, so I'm from the generation where you didn't do it before you were married. So this was just straight. I mean, I was amazed that they would be so presumptuous. So that was my background.
Another night we went into this nightclub called the Old Petit Bois, which is kind of a getting together place for Italians, Americans, Finns, everybody, all nationalities. I couldn't believe it, the way that they dance. Nobody even is dancing. They just hold on to each other, make out the whole time during the song, stop, and then start again when the next song starts. I was just cracking up, staring at everybody. I can't believe this.
Is this the same letter as well?
Well, it's just, yes, the same letter, a little different subject. It says, we had ox tongue for dinner. Speaking of new experiences when you leave your hometown. Ugh. If it weren't for the Dutch bread and dessert, I might even lose some weight. A French student had a birthday and kissed every girl on both cheeks in celebration. Leave it to the French, n'est-ce pas? I'm one naive. I'm proud of being naive, but I was naive.
I don't want to jump too far ahead because the next note that you have here is in October, but I do want to eventually ask you, like, how you enter this experience and then a year later, how you would say you changed.
I hope I changed a lot. I really appreciated this incentive to look at my old letters because over and over again, I learned from the Italians that money isn't the most important thing, that family and friends are really important, and food especially important as well, and that if you encounter someone walking along the street, that's an opportunity. It's not an interruption in your day. And this has a relationship to maybe you're waiting for the plumber and it's taking a long time, but that same plumber is, talking to you on the street, asking you how you are, that kind of thing. The openness and the friendliness and the savoring of life, I hope I never lose. And this is getting a little ahead, but when I saw the Statue of Liberty coming back home after 10 months, it was just a chilly bump experience. I loved it. And then when we got off the boat, it seemed to me everyone had a wrinkled brow. This is my impression, that we worry too much. We don't really stop and smell the roses. So I hope that I always retain that. And I'm a bit type A, so I need reminding.
The transportation, of course, in those days was quite different. So they took a ship from New York to Amsterdam, and that's how they got home. So it's 10 days on a ship. Another comment, because I did pay attention to the interaction she was having with other men, was that the ship they went over on was a Dutch ship, and they had a lot of really young, good-looking Dutch people working on the boat. And apparently some of the girls from that group got real friendly with them.
Of course, not me.
Oh, no.
No. One thing I remember about the Dutch and the boat, though, when we boarded the boat at the beginning of our year, as I was going up the gangplank thing, I heard someone say, Yankees. And it was pejorative. It was so clear this was not a good thing. And it was a clue to what I would learn during the year. That although I'm proud to be an American, I'm proud of so many things about our country, that if someone was asked at birth, which nationality would you be? They wouldn't necessarily say, oh, I'd like to be an American. That's how chauvinistic I was starting my year in Italy. I hope it's gotten better.
Did you ever go abroad too, Mike, or no?
Well, I've traveled a lot since then, but at that point in my life, I'd never been on an airplane before. And probably the furthest away I'd been is maybe Montana, going fishing. But no, I hadn't. At that point, I had never traveled. Since then, I've traveled all over the world.
Since you were sort of sent away to delay this wonderful, happy 52-year marriage, did you have a desire to go explore other cultures, or was this sort of something you were forced into?
Oh, no. I started out as a poli-sci major. I wanted to be an ambassador. I've always been fascinated by other countries. Maybe you could say grass is greener type. I hope not that, but definitely fascinated. I had a wonderful college professor from Lithuania who got me all excited about this kind of international stuff. So I announced to my parents naively that I was going to study in Paris. And they investigated it, and they found that it wouldn't be chaperoned. So that was not an option. And I had taken a couple years of college French, and that was sort of my direction. So when the Jesuits started a program in Gonzaga, my dad had taught law school there. He coached the baseball team. It was familiar ground. So he's like, this'll be a wholesome program. You can go to this one. How about going to Italy? I was really interested in other countries, so I was very willing to go. Nothing against Mike, but I was excited to go to Europe.
kids needed some soap, so we found out where there'd be a supermarket. And that was a mistake of the year. Just have this fabulous, modern, clean supermarket where they sell American cereals and all this stuff with like Rice Krispies has on it. Instead of Snap, Crackle, and Pop, it has Peef, Puff, Poof. Just a panic. Anyway, they had cookies, and chocolate and all these things that we haven't seen. Once we got out of Germany, where they had all those pastries, we haven't really had that much sweets or anything. Once a week, we get a dessert at the noon meal, and that's on Sunday. And besides that, we just never get anything sweet, which of course is good. But anyway, the supermarket was just fantastic, and I didn't buy one thing, but I stayed in there for half an hour. I just went looking at everything. My parents would have about died if they could have seen me.
I told you I was a goody two-shoes, okay? Each morning as I return from Mass, I hear the ragman singing his chant. The nuns are very anxious to hear what we do each time we leave the villa. They are slowly digesting the American college girl. Suora Maria is teaching me the Italian prayers each morning. Need I say this is a letter to my family? Every other week we eat at the boys' place. It is a regular Jesuit house, and there are 8 Italian students there whom we try to converse with. Next month, some Italian girls will be moving into our place. I bought an umbrella. Also bought some badly needed skirt hangers. Last night, I saw Lucia di Lammermoor by Donizetti. It was a very colorful opera, and the music was tremendous. We caught about 1 of every 10 words spoken, but the acting was so well done that we understood enough. The sets were elaborately done also. The audience hisses and shouts its sentiments without reservation.
I love that. Now, when you read that, can you immediately picture that night?
Yes, and there's kind of a postscript on that one because my closest friend, who was also a student there, that started her lifelong passion for opera. She commutes from Marble Mount to the Seattle Opera. She has for these many years since. I mean, I like the idea of going to the opera. I love getting dressed up for the opera. I want people to ask me what I'm doing that evening, but I don't really connect to it very well.
How about you? How do you feel about the opera?
I'm not an opera fan, although I've had some Italians who worked for me in the lab who were absolutely incredible supporters of the opera. Had one of the guys that collected, I think, every album that had ever been sung by Maria Callas. I mean, that was his favorite opera singer.
That makes me wish Tiffany was here because she would know who that was.
Yeah, I thought of that immediately with Tiffany.
I know. Support for the Bittersweet Life comes from Lugs, offering a full range of stylish footwear for the entire family. From boots to canvas options, their shoes are comfortable and fun no matter what season it is.
Lugs are affordable and versatile. And even if you're working from home, Katie, you still need shoes.
You know I need shoes, Tiffany. I haven't bought shoes in a long time.
So treat yourself. You can never have enough shoes. Lugs is offering our listeners a discount of 30% off right now when they visit lugs.com. That's LUGZ.com.
Yes, visit there and enter the promo code BITTERSWEET for 30% off all full-price items. That's BITTERSWEET for 30% off. Lugs is a great brand with shoes for the entire family. Stylish, realistically priced, and great for everyday wear.
Lugs has a wide range of options, from canvas shoes to stylish boots. You should really check them out. You just might find the exact shoe you've been wishing for.
Visit lugs.com and enter the code BITTERSWEET. So contrast that letter to the family with this letter to Mike from the same month.
Yes. Okay. None of us have been snowed by the Italian mail, an old expression.
Define.
Head over heels, in love with, impressed. We think they're great. Snowed. None of us have been snowed by the Italian mail. They are so insistent that they're irresistible. They just pressure and pressure. Most of them know 3 words in English. Kiss me, yes? No girl ever returns from a walk by herself without a story about an Italian man who grabbed her or pinched her or followed her, propositioned her, or all four! Exclamation point.
Wow. Jeez, none of that happened to me when I was in Rome.
No, nor me these days. Those were the days.
I remember the story about her talking about the girls going to classes in the morning when they all came out. So there's like 35 women, right?
And 5 blondes.
The Italian males would set up basically a corridor that they had to pass through. So all the men would be on either side as the women walked through this corridor on their way to class.
I must admit that I admired the Italian men's practice of saying bombolina to each one of us. I mean, we are of varied looks. And they thought every woman was terrific. So I really didn't mind because I was with my friends going through the gauntlet every morning. Just no touching, please.
In some ways, it's very complimentary.
Yes.
A boost of confidence as you head out into the world.
And it's another way, zest for life kind of thing. Absolutely. Puts a spring in your step.
We wear heels every day to class, and just wearing a bulky sweater and a pleated skirt is just practically like wearing blue jeans to school. I mean, you had to wear a classic sweater, the kind you like, and a straight skirt, suit jacket, and heels. I'm still going crazy over the European hairdos. I'm really having a blast. You probably will die when you see some of the pictures.
Okay, speaking of deep, you might remember what happened in November 1963. I said, it is very interesting and inspiring to be on the other side at such a time as when the president of a foreign country dies. I sat down with my dictionaries and tried to read the Florence and Paris accounts of the tragedy until we were able to get a report in English from the Munich Army base. Bishop Topol celebrated Mass in Kennedy's memory on Saturday morning, and we all attended. This was the first Mass in Italy, especially for him. All the flags have been at half-mast, and the concerts, operas, etc. scheduled for last weekend were all called off because of the killing. I watched the funeral on TV this morning. It is so hard for us to believe it happened. Really makes us feel very far removed. 2 fellows in my French lit class at the university came up to me and offered their sympathies in broken English. The nuns were crying when we returned after dinner Friday night. The Italians have very big hearts.
Were you surprised by how affected Italy was by the murder of John F. Kennedy?
Yes and no. I could see pictures of Kennedy and windows, so it kind of gave me a little clue. But it was beautiful. That reminds me of something that I was very surprised of, though, that I may not have written about. Okay, it's 1963. World War II happened. We studied it. I came to Europe and talked with people, the grandmas, etc., the parents who had experienced the war. And it was so present to them. It was, to me, as if it had just happened. I hadn't experienced a war, so that the poignancy and the depth and the memories, and not just looking at bombed buildings in some of the other cities, but the memories. It was as if it had just happened. I guess that sums it up. That was a lesson.
Another thing I remember about that November time period is that you did Thanksgiving, which they were not familiar with. So the women fixed a Thanksgiving dinner for the Italians, and they were quite curious about this.
Okay. I had written, Wednesday, a group of us are attempting to make 10 cherry, 10 apple, 17 pumpkin, and 6 mince pies, using the oven of one of the nearby bakeries. It's actually a bar, but I said bakeries. We will be up all night, I swear, but it will be worth it just to have dessert. No altruism. I wanted a pie. We're having 100 people at our Thanksgiving festa. Could be big. We usually try to speak Italian at all meals, and Thursday we even get to use English the whole time. Yes!
So much easier. I like how you kind of whitewash certain things. Like, why would you say bakery instead of a bar?
Maybe, yeah. Well, a bar was someplace that I shouldn't be, I suppose. So bakery kind of... And it was new to me that a bakery could be for children and you can go get your coffee. I mean, a bar could be for children and you get your coffee.
Is that a letter to your family?
Nope, that was to you.
So she was whitewashing stuff to you as well.
Same idea, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that you were keeping from him while you were gone?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to tell us what you remember?
Well, I happen to know that she ended up with an Italian boyfriend.
You want to tell us about that?
Well, one thing I'd forgotten, I can safely tell since we have company, a witness here. I'd forgotten this when I was going through the letters, that I had written my father and asked how one arranges for two wonderful Italian young men to spend a year in the United States. And I said, they're very intelligent and they very well informed. They know much more than I do about real politics, which absolutely was true. They knew more about America than I knew from my civics classes, etc. And wouldn't they be wonderful to learn about America? And then they planned absolutely after 1 year to go back and to share the information, with the people back home. Well, one of them was Torquato Parisi. He was a distraction. Had a motorcicletta, tall, black hair.
Big nose.
Blue eyes, no big nose.
Did you keep in touch with him when you came home?
No, and I guess I'm still a goody two-shoes. My friends in our 50th reunion back in Florence, two of my roomies had made arrangements to meet the guys that they had dated. Their two Dutch guys came to Florence, or they went to Holland, or that's my old school. They went to the Netherlands. Anyway, they got together. They said, "Oh, we're Christmas cards. I mean, we've been in contact." Well, I'm like, it would be an occasion of sin. I shouldn't contact Torquato ever, and I'm glad I didn't. But he did show up unbidden. Not really showed up physically, but I can't even remember which person said this to me, but someone came to me years later, maybe 20 years ago or something, and said, I was in Cuba. Do you know Torquato Parisi? And I said, oh yeah, he had always wanted to go to Cuba. He happened to belong to the Communist Party. I don't want our house to be possessed. At that time, the Communist Party in Italy was addressing the plight of the youth. They could go to school till they're 14. That was kind of it. They needed to work, and their opportunities were few, and the economy wasn't so great. So the Italian Communist Party was responding to that. So I went to a couple of meetings, and Torquato was quite active in that. Anyway, he asked this person if she knew Sonny O'Melveny, because that's my maiden name, from Spokane, Washington. And he said, yes, it was just a riot. Anyway, that was that. That's my interaction.
That's it. So when you left, you never saw him again?
No.
That's new information for me, by the way. She hadn't shared that before.
How do you feel about this boyfriend that she had over there?
Well, I wasn't too crazy about it, but it's been a habit of hers when she's been separated from me, which I think was her parents' objective all along. She went to the University of Portland her first 2 years. I was at Gonzaga. I got a Dear Mike letter during that period of time. But she did come back. I mean, the boomerang effect was playing well. But then she goes to Italy, and of course, she ends up with an Italian boyfriend. Not that I was being straight-laced myself, but nevertheless, we do have to pay attention to those things.
I was going to ask. It's not like you weren't going on dates during this period of time yourself.
I might have been, yes. It's true. I might have been dating myself, yes.
His nickname is Speedy.
Oh, yeah? How so?
Yeah.
They both turn red.
You have to earn it,
That was my college nickname, yes.
And I remember from the tapes of you lamenting the fact that he's not writing enough, that you miss him so much. Tell me about that.
That is absolutely honest. And I hadn't met Torquato in the first few months. But it was really true. And I still planned on marrying him. But I became so philosophical because when you stay at a youth hostel in Europe, in those times anyway, I hope still now, you discuss the cosmos. I mean, you listen to people telling you there is no God, and they know all of St. Thomas's proofs. And you're like, wow. I was just really broadening. I don't know, it sounds kind of rude with my husband sitting next to me, but it was so different living there. Very few people spoke English. I was so thrilled to think in Italian. My roomies told me I even spoke out in my sleep in Italian. So I immersed myself. I cared about Mike, but I definitely had a very Well, we have school 4 days a week. They still just have Monday through Thursday, and you travel the other 3 days. And we went all around the world, so I was absorbed in the experience.
One of my biggest regrets from college is that I didn't even think about going overseas. How important would you actually say it is for somebody in their 20s to go overseas, or is it?
Well, it depends on what your attitude is when you get there. Okay, I'm getting a little judgy here. I have met people who never spoke to an Italian when they were in Italy for, 1 to 25 weeks. I mean, that's an exaggeration. But I think that you should try to learn some of the language, and you should definitely, now that everyone speaks English, you don't really have to do that. But I think you should really have conversations with the people from that country, not just drift through and go to your American hotel. I'm very big on that. That's where the judgy comes in. Because I have talked with people who came back with amazing generalizations, and I'm like, but that wasn't my experience. I would encourage everybody, including my grandson, the experience at that time of life when you're deciding whom you want to be, and you're thinking of the perspective of being an American in this world, in the small world that we have today. It informs you terrifically. I like to read the Christian Science Monitor because of the international coverage, and I think it's even-handed. And I can read about all these different countries, and if I've been there, I have a different perspective. I don't know it all. I just have a hint that maybe there's more to the story, or that doesn't sound quite right. So for your own pleasure, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Also, it will be with you your whole life, looking at our country from outside.
I guess there's 75,000 Americans living in Rome, but I think that it's so much more important to really get an idea of how the Europeans live only by living it. And like in Florence, we have to speak Italian just constantly, with the shopkeepers and stuff. And we don't eat American food at all. We haven't even found a place where they have hamburgers. But in Rome, there's always American bars, and most of the people, like the shopkeeper will speak English, and maybe the clerks won't, but there's just so much American influence in Rome that it's a fun place to visit, but we decided we wouldn't trade it for Florence. Another huge difference is in the Italian men in Rome. Like in Florence, they just look you up and down and everything, and once in a while you'll get pinched, but in Rome, they just sit there in about 5 or 6, groups of 5 or 6, and just follow you down the street, grab you and all this stuff. There's so much there. I mean, really a bother instead of just being a compliment, I guess.
Katie here, stepping into the show for a brief moment to say that if you're new to the program, don't be afraid to go back and listen from the beginning, or just dabble through the shows of the past. Most of our topics are timeless. They are as fun today as they were years ago. So please subscribe to the show and then explore. Also, if you're all caught up and you'd love some new content, we are releasing brand new episodes on patreon.com/thebittersweetlifepodcast. This month, Tiffany reveals how she remembers so many ancient Roman facts off the top of her head, and I tell you the worst piece of advice I ever followed. All that and more for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/thebittersweetlifepodcast. There are links in the show notes. And one final thing, August is Tiffany's birthday month, and I would love to get her the gift of more reliable internet. We have had all sorts of internet issues in the past year, and this show has been all the harder to make because of it. As you know, Tiffany is in Rome and I am in Seattle. We are always working remote with each other. Help me build up enough money to give her this gift. Heck, give us both this gift. Send a one-time birthday present donation through PayPal at thebittersweetlife.net and send your greetings and well wishes to Tiffany at the same time. thebittersweetlife.net. And now, back to the show. Mike, I don't know if you would remember, but do you remember what she was like when she came back? Would you say that she seemed any different?
That's really funny.
Tell us why.
So she...
I don't want to snort on it.
She and a girlfriend went to Ireland at the end because they were both Irish, and so they went to Ireland, and they bought these nylons. So when I met her at the airport to pick her up, she comes down the ramp off the airplane. I mean, again, this is 64. And she's gained about 15 pounds, and she's wearing these bright orange stockings. And I barely recognized her. So, changed? Well, yeah, I'd say so. Who is that person?
Il pane terrifico. I couldn't help myself. I love bread. Plus, they would take the meat. They would say we're having veal for dinner, and we would start to hear the pounding, as we approached the pensione, because we subsequently moved to a pensione. And it was tasteless and tough, but the bread was delicious, and I was hungry. Now, the nylons in those days were really expensive, and you wore them once, and they ran, and you paid $5, and you wore them, and you couldn't afford them. But Ireland had industrial strength nylon.
And you picked orange because
I thought it blended in. I didn't realize it was so orange. I just knew it was so sturdy. I was so grateful.
Well, what about on the larger sense, Mike, besides just change it?
Yes. Is that what you meant?
No. Beyond a physical appearance.
Well, we had a number of interesting discussions, particularly her experience with attending the Communist Party meetings, because, I came from a pretty conservative family, and of course in those days it wasn't so long after all the McCarthy hearings and all that sort of thing that being a communist was not exactly an acceptable thing to be. Yeah. Plus, I had been accepted into the Navy, so I was going to be joining the Navy right at the time we were about to be married. I was a little nervous about whether or not I'd ever pass any security checks because she'd been seen at a Communist Party meeting.
Before cell phone cameras, thank goodness.
Yeah, right. Less proof.
So clearly her whole attitude towards life had changed. I mean, really, it was very interesting to see the transformation.
Yeah, and how soon after getting back did you two actually get married? I mean, it must have taken some time to come back together after being apart, right?
I was in lab school. She came back in June or July.
I think July.
My lab school finished the 1st of August, and then I had to go back to the ranch for harvest. I was working on the farm, and it was about 100 miles from Spokane, so I would drive on Saturday. I'd get off early on Saturday afternoon and drive the 100 miles to Spokane so we could date, go out, and then I'd stay over at her place and then sleeping in the basement, and then we'd go out on Sunday, and then I'd drive home at 2 in the morning. I'm not sure how I ever survived because I was always falling asleep on the highway, but at that same time, it was during the Vietnam buildup, and so the draft was very active. I knew I was about to be drafted. Before I finished lab school, I wrote a letter to all of the Surgeon Generals at Army, Navy, and Air Force. I think her father had something to do with that. And it just happened the Navy was starting a new program for lab people, medical technologists, to run blood banks. And I got into the Navy program about the same time that I got my draft letter. So I went through the whole draft process, and they held it up until I heard from the Navy whether I was accepted or not. And I was accepted. So we made plans to get married, and basically we got married in Spokane and got in the car and drove to the East Coast for me to join the Navy. And 20 years later, I retired.
So it's a short story about what happened when I first got home. I melted. I mean, I love the way Mike looks with all his freckles and his olive skin. He has a little native blood in him. He's neat. I fell in love with him because he was wearing a shirt that his mother had ironed perfectly. He's kind and he's generous, so there was no question.
And I danced.
Oh, fabulous dancer. But there was a big problem with this family who respected education. And I was a good student. Well, what are you going to do about your college, Sonny? You shouldn't get married until after you graduate. It's just in May. Oh, no, I must go and with my man. He's going, to the East Coast. So I didn't finish college at that point. And I'm so proud of my dad for this one. Unbeknownst to me, he put enough money for a semester of college in a DC bank. That's where we were going to be living. It would only be used for education. I took advantage of that, and I went to George Washington, and when we lived in Philly, I went to Rutgers or whatever. I eventually, in absentia, I finished my Gonzaga U undergraduate degree, thanks to my dad putting that money in there, when I, as a person who's 20, only thinks about my guy, and no, I can't wait a semester.
How did your parents end up coming around to the two of you getting married?
Did you hear about the Navy? My dad is very Army, and you'd think that'd be a conflict, but it was military. It made him fine. It made him okay. And they ended up loving him, of course.
Only took 6 years.
Yeah, 6 years.
So Melanie and Linda and I walked back by ourselves, and of course they're in the red light district, which is really interesting. And we only had about, within a period of 2 blocks, there were, 10, I think it was 9 or 10 cars stopped us and asked us, how much, this little treat. And I guess they're one of the main red light districts of Rome, and you're walking along there, girls. It was kind of fun at first until they started getting out of their cars and following us and all this stuff. I was kind of panicked. Then we went back to the dorm, where we got to sleep about, 1 o'clock or something like that. And the next morning we had to get up at 5 because we had gotten special tickets from North American College for the consecration the next day of 20 bishops in St. Peter's. And the Pope Paul said the Mass. He actually said the Mass, and I guess this is very rare that he will say the Mass in public. So here we were. We had second row seats. We were right behind the bishops. And I just can't explain it, Mike. We were there in the cathedral, or in St. Peter's, from 8 o'clock in the morning till 12 at noon, and we just never once did we ever get tired because there was so much to see. It was just, I couldn't believe that the Pope was actually saying Mass, and they had it broadcast on a loud system so we could understand everything because it was Latin, and the whole St. Peter's, if you can imagine, answers these prayers in Latin. Oh, it just so much emphasized the unity of the Catholic Church. It was just really beautiful.
Well, we should probably end it pretty soon, but is there a few more lines from these letters that we shouldn't miss before we head on out?
Okay, this is January, and I really can't remember exactly when I met Torquato. I have never been more lonely than now, darling. Sometimes I can't see how I will last till June. I'm getting so sick of all the men in the world except you, believe me. I know I can never expect to get more attention from men as I am getting this year, and I'm glad of it. It's not that big of a compliment either, because being feminine is the only requisite for their undivided attention. I swear a young woman, 18 to 25 years old, could go around the world, dance and dine and sightsee for about $10. Anyway, I'm so thankful I have you to think of, for if I didn't have this reassurance, I swear I hated all men in general. Now, the fellows on our group are really sweet to us and nice guys, but they seem a little young acting to me. Also, whenever I feel lonely for you, I go up to Jim Boyd or one of the other guys who has a girl back home, and we cry on each other's shoulders, figuratively speaking. Anyway, I have been very thankful that I came to Europe with a group, and I like every one of my comrades.
Oh, I love that. Mike?
They had an amazing year. Their Christmas time, they went to the Middle East, and they went to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Egypt and Lebanon, and in the spring they went to Spain, and they did this whole year on $3,000 that included room, board, tuition, and all those trips. I mean, it was an incredible experience. Now, I think the reason that they were able to do that is because the priests who organized this had no idea how to make a business plan. And so they had big problems partway through the year running out of money. But I was pretty concerned about her, actually, because in some of her letters, some of the experiences she had with men were really horrendous.
We take turns as far as eating goes. One week we eat at our place, and the next week we eat at the boys' place. So there's always some of the boys over here, and then some of us over there. And when we go over there, we can speak with the Italian boys, and it helps us with our language and stuff. But I really think that the Italian man acts more immature or something. I don't know what the story is. Melanie and I were sitting in the park one day, and about 5 Italian soldiers came up to us and talking to us. You know, it's real interesting at first because you want to speak the language and all this junk. But they sit there and ask you what you're doing after breakfast, you know, dopo la prima la colazione, what you're doing after lunch, dopo la pranzo, and after dinner, dopo la, cena, whatever it is. They sit there and ask you what you're doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you know. And just insistent until it drives you bugs, you know. We're scared to really accept any dates, so you have no sweat as far as that goes. It's not so bad when the young guys, you know, make comments, pinch here, something like that, but it's the old guys, everybody, all the men, they just stare all the time.
You spoke about one of your experiences in one of the episodes, and she had many of those.
Yeah, that was the assault episode. I think Tiffany and I both talked about the hazards of traveling and not quite knowing what's going on.
Yeah, you had one on an elevator in the Vatican.
Do you want to tell us about it?
No. I subsequently was a victim of rape as an adult, and I'm kind of not going there.
Okay, fair enough. Mike, did you feel like you couldn't, in that way, were these letters, I don't know, like a sort of mental torture, or like where were you mentally when you're receiving all this and so far away?
It was disturbing to read about that because, clearly those kind of experiences are going to change you. Yeah. And of course, it concerned me that she would come back with feeling more or less like she explained there in her letter that it might affect our relationship. But fortunately, we got past it.
Mm-hmm. Did you find another clip you want to read before we close?
Trying to have one that I haven't said anything about before. We stopped off to visit Graziano, an Italian fellow who is getting married this Thursday. He is so nice and very patient with my Italian language. I'm excited about the wedding. From what I understand, we will attend at the church ceremony and then just visit and eat all day long. I've been abstaining in view of tomorrow's orgy and don't fear being disappointed. Don't I sound like a disrespectful glutton? The thing is that our food is very institutional, though substantial, and yet really good Italian food is better than one can imagine. All the dear Italian mamas have been talking about this wedding out their windows for at least a month, and they will keep close track of it for years to come. No one gets by with anything here. These people are so observant and curious that they'd make the best eyewitnesses in the world.
And then we went up to another Michelangelo Square also, Piazza Navona, with these fabulous fountains, just about 5 times as big as the Trevi fountain. Just statues, they're just magnificent. And then at night they're all lit up, just gorgeous. It is so romantic city. I can't stand this, Mike. Oh. Anyway, Father took us afterwards to have some cappuccino, which is kind of whipped milk and coffee. And then it has chocolate, kind of cocoa grated over it. It's really good.
And both of you have made sort of a ritual of going back to Italy on a pretty regular basis. Is that because of this experience? Like, did Italy become sort of a center point for your travels, or what do you think?
Well, my career in science has taken us around the world. By coincidence, I'm on a major project right now with the World Health Organization, and it's centered in Rome. So the transplant programs are centered in Rome, and this project has run that organization. So it takes us there at least once a year. And then I'm writing some materials for various aspects of transfusion and transplantation, and those activities are in Europe. So we've been traveling between Geneva, where WHO is, and Rome. And most of the meetings, however, have been in Rome. So we'll be going back there again in November.
What do you do?
What do I do while he's in his meetings? Yeah. I sit off on my own in my 73 years old self. But I've done this for all those years. I just take off on my own, and I do try to use my Italian. I must admit it's disappointing to me because so many people prefer to speak English rather than listening to my very slow Italian. But sometimes if I'm going to buy something or I'm going to patronize a place, I say, I would really appreciate it if you would let me speak Italian. When our daughter asked me to take her to Florence, she was expecting her first baby, and she said, I don't know what life's going to be like beyond this, but you've always told me about Florence. You've told me about Italy. So let's go to Italy. You know, she has baby in her tummy, so to speak, and mom, and she doesn't know what the future is going to be like as far as her commitments. So we went to Florence, and I got there on that soil, and I looked at her, and I said, honey, I think I'm more myself in Italy than I am in the States.
What did you mean by that?
Stop and smell the roses. I get a little bit busy here with all my commitments and such. I care about others, which is a good thing, but I need to almost schedule my relaxation. So when I'm in Italy, I don't have any other responsibilities. I guess that's most other places, but I also have the wonderful example of their zest for life, and it resonates. And then when I speak Italian, I guess I feel more open and relaxed.
That was something that we've talked about on the show. Is that something that's up with American culture, where you come back and you immediately start going, I need to do more. I need to fill my life with more things, or something like that.
As I said, you get a perspective of our own culture from outside, and that's a very different perspective. I'm so sure of myself, which isn't bad when you're 20 or any age. And so I said, I will never have 2 cars. I'm always going to wear subtle, neutral colors and heels. Of course, it's so comfortable here. So, when I returned, we really have a lovely environment here. Anyway, but I did learn that the material things weren't important, but I was so enamored of everything they did seemed to be so interesting to me. So most of the things were to be copied and some not so much. But I remember a friend of mine, through Mike Science, wrote a book. It's a Harvard Press book about Woodrow Wilson and the American myth. I read it because she's my friend. It's quite a scholarly book. But there's a section there where she says, when Italians came to the United States, there was all this bias against them, right? So many different groups, but Italians as well. And why? Because they were taking it easy. Why? Because they were laughing and taking a long time enjoying the company at dinners. All of these things. They didn't seem like it was the most important thing in the world to get something done now. So they're criticized. Then more people, not just the very wealthy, eventually now go to Italy. We go there on purpose. We save our pennies so we can go there. We love being there. Why? The same characteristics, for the same reasons that we rejected them when they came to our country. So that's a sad part of our history.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you have anything else you want to say, Mike, before we say goodbye?
Well, of course. There are so many stories. We could probably spend the whole day, and we're both kind of storytellers anyway. But just to say a little bit more about that experience of traveling abroad, we have friends now, I think, in most of the major cities in the world, friendly enough that they're quite open with us. In general, they don't maybe share their thoughts to Americans in general because, it's a little bit risky. But because we know each other so well now, they're quite open about what's happening in America. So we get a lot of feedback about what's going on in America. And all over the world, people track what's going on in this country. For the most part, they know a lot more about our politics than most Americans know. It's really been an interesting experience to talk with them about our system of government. It's just a completely different perspective that you would never get anywhere else.
I don't want to talk to them about our elections. That's the only bad thing about our upcoming Italian trip. It'll be after the elections, and we'll see.
You're hoping that you're not talking about President Trump or...
Amen.
We'll find out. Polling-wise, it's looking good, people, that he's not going to win. But we don't know. Well, thank you for this, and maybe we'll have to do it again and hear more of the stories. But thank you so much for doing this.
You are welcome. I know it helps keep a commitment to go walking if you have bittersweet along with you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mike.
Thanks for coming out.
You were the one that shared the tapes originally, whether or not Sunny knew, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think she wasn't quite aware of that, and initial reception was perhaps not so positive. But like everything else, she gets over my eccentricities.
I actually have one more question about those reel-to-reel tapes in general. How did you decide to send audio back rather than just letters?
It was rather advanced, and he's an early adapter. So friends of all ages use him as their iTech person, doesn't matter what age. He worked at Penny's department store, and they sold this plastic tape recorder, reel-to-reel. So he bought 2 of them. We only talked about Mike's shortcomings. I don't know where mine is. I don't know where his tapes are, I must admit. But that's why. It's like a new toy. I mean, wow, look at this portable. Runs by batteries.
There were some technical difficulties, however, because we thought they would be a match because they're the same make and everything, but they're really cheap. Mm-hmm. Apparently, my tapes didn't play very well on her recorder. She had to figure out how to make them go faster because otherwise I sounded like
And this was germane because I was listening to the tapes in the bathroom because I lived with lots of other people and shared my room, etc. So the bathroom was the private place. So that's where I would record and listen to Mike's tape recording because I thought it was so private.
Actually, it sounded very professional because it was like she had the reverb turned up.
Yeah. A nice kind of echo in the background.
Echo in the background.
So as we have been listening to these tapes, we should be picturing you in the bathroom. What, sitting in a tub or in the shower?
Closed toilet seat.
Yeah.
Mio caro amico, I am now sitting in the john on the edge of the bathtub so that no one can hear me recording this. I think I already told you that my roommates are Melanie Ferguson and Joan Schiffler, so they're about laughing their butts off in the room right now because I had to come all the way in here to do the tape.
Well, thanks again, you guys. It's so nice to meet you.
Same here.
And this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.